Good afternoon and welcome everyone to this program, which is entitled Silent No More, the Two-Spirit Journey. My name is Paula Palmer, and I'm co-director of Toward Right Relationship with Native Peoples. This is a program of Friends Peace Teams. I'm joining you from the unceded homelands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute peoples, also known as Colorado's Front Range. As we come together virtually from many parts of this continent, let's acknowledge that all the lands where we live and work are homelands of Indigenous nations. Many Indigenous people call this land Turtle Island, while Native tribes were forced to give up large parts of their territories or move far away from them. They are still here on Turtle Island and still exist as nations. We recognize the irreducible and ongoing relationship that Indigenous peoples have with their traditional territories. Land acknowledgement statements like this one become meaningful when they serve as the basis for building relationships with Indigenous peoples and with the land. I'm going to step aside now and introduce my colleague, Mackenzie Barton-Rolich, who is our program support staff and tech person. And Mackenzie will introduce our speakers.
Hello, folks. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Mackenzie, and I use Z and here, or she and her pronouns. I'm queer, non-binary, and transgender, as well as a white settler on Coast Salish land, more specifically, Duwamish land, here in Seattle. This means that I'm an accomplice to my two-spirit siblings, not two-spirit myself. I had the privilege of being allowed to stay at the Two-Spirit Camp as an ally back in 2016 when we were protesting the Dakota Access Pipeline in North Dakota. I met Candi Brings Plenty there because they were the leader of the Two-Spirit Camp. Throughout our friendship, I have really admired Candi's insights into colonial power dynamics and their rich spiritual leadership. Jordan Decker I met much more recently through my work with Toward Right Relationship with Native Peoples. It's been a pleasure getting to know him. I'm really grateful that he has allowed me to witness his spiritual groundedness and grace in a variety of circumstances. And I aspire to match his skill at both of those. I'm very excited to welcome them both here today to share their knowledge, stories, and insights. So the plan is for Jordan and Candi to speak for the next hour or so, and then we will have some time for questions. We will have a brief closing at the end, including some announcements. And send any questions you have for Jordan and Candi to me in the chat. So you should currently in the chat only be able to send messages to Paula and I. We'll switch that when you're asked to have some interaction with everybody, but mostly you should only be able to send tech questions to me and also questions for Candi and Jordan in the Q&A part. All right, so Jordan and Candi, the floor is yours.
I can go first and introduce myself. Hematak Yapi, Leampe Tukile, Iwahachante, Washte Nape Chuziapie, Imachiapi, Wakia Tuampi Ioyambawi, Imachiapi, Chante Makilawi, Imataha na Ocheti Shakoi territory. I would like to greet each and every one of you with a handshake from my heart. My name's Candi Brings Plenty, and I'm coming from South Dakota, from the Pine Ridge Reservation. I'm an Oglala Lakota Sioux tribal member, and I'm here in the Sacred Black Hills as part of the Ocheti Shakoi territory, and I identify as a non-binary two-spirit, and I also very much you know, it's really hard for me to like subscribe to all these boxes, but that's exactly why we want to do a presentation like this, because the word two-spirit is definitely contemporary, and it is something that I very much advocate for and want to elevate and nourish and continue to elevate for folks to create that safe space, even with just those two words, Two-Spirit, because I found my home and identity in this term. So with that said, I'm going to pass it on to Jordan.
Great, Candi. Thank you so much. I'm a member of the Cherokee Nation, a trans man known as Same Heart Smiling in my community. I'm a national and international speaker. I'm the founder of Trans Heartline, which was a safe post-op recovery house for folks having gender affirmation surgery. I'm the creator of the Alchemy of Authenticity trauma-informed coaching service, a plant medicine guide, and I work part-time with Dr. Gabor Mate, which as their diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging coordinator. Let me get all of those words out. It's such a joy to be here today, and I'll keep it short and sweet on my intro. So, Candi, do you want me to start with some of the other terms, or did you want to start with something else first?
Definitely let's start with those terms, and then, we can mosey on into the Two-Spirit component. And I'm going to step away for 1 second and plug in my laptop. I think my plug-in box isn't working, or my cord, but I'm going to check into that and be right back.
Awesome, thank you. So I want to just start with a little affirmation of why we're here. Our intention today is to give and receive a conversation on the Two-Spirit journey. You will leave with an understanding of the history and the current climate of our community. This will be a 101. If you have more advanced understanding or questions, please send them to Mackenzie in the chat for the Q&A part of our workshop. We will be speaking about some hard truths. Please take care of your emotional health as we go along. Please be respectful when differences occur. We can have any conversation through the lens of love. So let's start. So some general terms for those who for the 101 part. It's the Latin term meaning same. When it's used to define gender, it's you align with the gender you were assigned with at birth based on your genital presentation. Trans, or on the other side of, or across, used to define gender, to cross over from one gender to another. The term non-binary to two things or parts. Used to define gender, relating to or being a person who identifies with or expresses gender identity that is neither entirely male nor female. And then the term Two-Spirit. And Candi does an amazing job with this. So as mentioned before, this is a colonial term and relatively new. And we will dive deeply into that with Candi now.
Okay, so I will be sharing my screen and begin with a few slides here. Alrighty. Oh no. All right. Okay, folks, so before we begin, this is something I say to my own kiddos. I have two of my own baby bears. They're actually 20 and 21. I always forget, but they'll forever be my baby bears as I'm their mama bear. And they're both identified as Two-Spirit. And I tell them we're Lakota first before we're anything else. Before, I am my gender, before I am my, any identity I see or walk with throughout the day, so that means that I am going to identify the land we come from. And so, first of all, as an ally, that is something we must embrace, is the land that we are currently standing on. Because every single one of us you know, and I say this to my own children too. Your privilege and your success is built on the shoulders of my ancestors, our ancestors. Okay, so with this said, you know, whether you're on your laptop or your phone, you can get into the browser and type native-land.ca, or you can text 855-917-5263. Put in the city or state or zip code that you are in right now, and then you will receive a response of the tribal nations whose land that you are indigenously standing on, living on, succeeding on, thriving on. So you will always know who and how to give thanks. Or, you know, even within your own way of living, we need to walk that talk. Because yes, giving a land acknowledgement is amazing. Thank you. But we need action, not acknowledgement. Okay. So if you want to walk with that talk, then begin with understanding very thoroughly whose land you are standing on. Okay, so before I'm Two-Spirit, I am Lakota. So I know the land that I come from, and you know, that is the only tribal nation of the land that I live on. So I wanted to share that first. Before I'm Two-Spirit, let's talk about the land we come from.
Candi, before you go on, your slides, it looks like we're still looking at the sort of PowerPoint rather than the slide itself.
Oh,
I don't
no.
know if you want
Okay.
to unshare or reshare. Let's see if we can,
Okay, let's stop.
or just enter slideshow mode.
Yeah, all right, what happened here? Okay, I'm gonna do the whole desktop. Better? Okay,
Yes.
so slide 2, talking about land, another term is Turtle Island. So Turtle Island is actually all of North America. So, you know, that's why some of the terms that I use is, you know, Turtle Island has no borders. And that includes all of our relatives up in the north, First Nation relatives who are up in Canada, our Alaskan relatives, and then all of our southern relatives who are down in Mexico, because they are not Spaniards or Spanish or Hispanics. They come from the, you know, Mexico, and each and every one of them, just like in the United States and Canada, we have tribal nations who have their own languages, their own spirituality, their own cultural customs, and you know, we are an oral historical tradition of storytellers. And so, you know, and that is something that I often remind our tribal councils, and how I speak whenever I address the legislators during the legislative session, which just started this past week. I'm super excited for the legislative session, but you know, we are storytelling, whether it's politics or we're grant writing or fundraising or whatever that is, you know, and it comes back to the land where we're spending this money, that we're solving these critical issues and infrastructural problems on. So, you know, I think it's very important that we emphasize that, yes, we are building our success and privilege built on stolen land, built by stolen people. And Turtle Island had no borders. This is one nation. Okay, with that said, moving forward to the term Two-Spirit. Two-Spirit became a coined umbrella term in the early 1990s, because on this one, you know, I asked someone to help me put these slides together, but we have over 280 federally recognized tribes, and that's only recognized by the federal government. There are over like 500 tribes that are in total that have been documented by archaeologists with different languages and different customs in the United States alone, but only 280 have been federally recognized and given that recognition, and it all goes back to money and land. basically it's about land grabbing and again, land back, taking that land. But of those tribes, 155 of them actually have documentation of Two-Spirit people. And the way we're documented is in our language. And this is what I had taught in our tribe because, whenever I tried to advocate, and I'm going to show a little film, 4-minute film, when I moved back to South Dakota after living in Portland, Oregon for 10 years, I learned a lot of advocacy, and it was after Standing Rock. I chose to go and move back to my reservation, and I brought my skill set to pass some tribal ordinances, because even though we have all of these, we have had all of these recognitions and innovative laws that have passed to recognize marriage equality and family systems and infrastructures for gender diverse families. All of our reservations and tribal nations are sovereign nations. Each of them are like individual little countries. So none of the federal policies and laws are recognized on our reservations. So when I go home to my reservation, there was no marriage equality. I could not foster my own niece and nephew, because there was no, and if I had a wife, I could not share my insurance with them, or they would not be able to take ownership of our home that we built on my traditional land that my father left me. So each tribe has to pass their own tribal ordinances. So with that said, I had to address them and tell them, and we were able to pass these marriage equality and hate crimes because I had said, we're documented in our oral tradition. We have the word wink day for trans people. We have the word wia bloka for lesbian. We have all the terms for each of the LGBTQ in our language. So that is documented. So I believe, and a lot of folks like to push back. How can you talk about documentation, but there's over 155 tribes who do have these languages? And this is thrown in there because I'm talking about this contemporary term and how, as contemporary, we get to define what that looks like for us. And we also want to recognize that in each of our traditional roles, that our cultures recognize that there's fluidity in sexuality and gender, and those are two very different things. And I like to talk about how gender is how I identify myself to the world, and sexuality is who I love. Those are two different things. You have them as well, no matter what spectrum you see yourself on. And here are some of those terms that I was talking about. And all these other, I have a whole list of all 155, but I only wanted to put up a few. And so here are some of those terms and how they're translated in those languages. So that's why I was saying, I'm Lakota, I'm Oglala Lakota. So that says wink day. And some people, they say would be woman, but it's it's a connotation of transgender. So they're talking about a man or a woman. And in this translation, it was a woman, F to M. And so that's how that person had translated. But if there's any other tribal members here, if those are any of your tribes, you can send a message to Mackenzie and I can look up what I have and maybe send that to you. And definitely this is very much sex positive. I feel very empowered in my own sexuality, and I want that to be passed on because I also feel like the boarding school era did create a really big gap between, feeling safe in our bodies with learning a learned behavior from priests and nuns who were molesting and raping and abusing our relatives. And my parents both My mom's 74 and my dad has passed away, but my mom is still alive. They were the last generation of the stolen children who were forced to go to boarding school. And so I heard all the stories growing up, and my mom would always talk about, you know, because of the boarding school era, sex was always such a bad word, and it was so hush hush, but all the families had 10 plus children and nobody knew why or how. And you know, she was like, because they never talked about it because it was such um you know, it was such a big open wound about, you know, a lot of them, their first experience was being molested in the boarding school. So transphobia and homophobia was and is a learned behavior in the indigenous walk of life because of the boarding school era. I think this is probably the last one I'm gonna share and then pass it on. I definitely can continue to go on, but this is just kind of like the 101. And I want to continue sharing and giving space and time also to Jordan. We both have something more, I guess, personal from our own walk of lives to share. And I have another PowerPoint to share. So this is just kind of touching on the two spirits so folks can have a bigger or more vast understanding before we move forward. And I am a very big advocate for two-spirit youth. As I said, I have two baby bears, and you know, my work has always been just to create space, to bring visibility. But after witnessing my own children coming into their own identities and preferences in the world, I've seen firsthand, felt firsthand how we need to create those brave spaces. Not safe, because then we're putting fear first. We're allowing fear tactics to lead the way. So, you know, I'm very much an advocate for creating brave spaces and allowing our youth to lead the way and show us and teach us what they need. So I just want to close that with definitely I have been working towards creating coming of age ceremonies for moving forward in my work. That's what I'm working on next, is coming of age ceremonies for all two spirits of all ages, and then reclaiming our puberty ceremonies to include our gender diverse Wakaija children. And I will turn this back over.
You're awesome, Candi. Thank you so much. I guess I need to share my slide now. I think I did it right. This is really where I come from. Candi brought up so many different reasons why either we're scared or other people are scared of us. And it's my passion to turn scared into sacred, to take these moments and really be a change maker. And I started that process in 2017. I started a nonprofit here in Marin, California called Trans Heartline. At the time, I had been married to my wife for about 16 years, and I didn't feel safe going into what we lovingly call bottom surgery, gender affirmation surgery, with my spouse. And so after my recovery, I started this nonprofit with another woman, Janie Spar, who is an amazing human being. And we opened a house in Marin for people to recover without having to worry about fear of getting kicked out of where they were recovering, fear of being harmed while they're recovering. It's also been part of my passion to speak to the religious entities that hate on us and create this bridge between transgender, two-spirit, and religion. And I have a story about that in a minute. But Trans Heartline, super hard for me to speak in public. Like, I love that we're on Zoom because I have this neurospicy side of me that just closes down when I'm in front of a lot of people. And Miss Janie, she just kept pushing me out there in front of people. So I appreciate you all showing up on Zoom today. I'm still pushing myself to get out there in public, and you know, I appreciate that about Candi, not being shy about being on the front lines. Thank you, Candi. Thank you for the way that you're in service to the community. And so Trans Heartline became this wonderful place in Marin County, which, by the way, is a very white place. And so Miss Janie kept pushing me out there to get up and preach. And at the end of, I left at about 2.5 years, and a board took over and they took off and they're doing their thing now. But we had 9 different faith communities bringing food to the house every week. I mean, literally, we had people coming in and having to decide to eat ramen noodles during their recovery so that they had money to go home and pay rent, or have this bounty of food that the community was bringing to us so that they could heal with good, nourishing food. And it really, it still amazes me today how those folks have come together to really show us love when we have been a majority of our community is hurt by religious people. So I want to talk a little bit about ancestral trauma and what that looks like. So when my grandmother was pregnant with my mother, everything that she was going through, that energy was going into growing my mom. Now, understanding that every female is born with every egg that she will ever have, that means that all of that trauma from my grandmother was going into the eggs that she was growing inside of my mother. When my mother was born, I got my grandmother's trauma, I got my mother's trauma. And that's one way that we can look at ancestral trauma being passed down. Not long ago, there was a scientific, not study, losing my words. Anyway, they took a jar full of fleas, put the cap on it for 3 days. At the end of 3 days, they uncapped that jar, and not one flea inside that jar could jump higher than the jar. Subsequently, every one of those fleas that then had more fleas, none of the fleas could jump higher than the jar. So just another way to really see how ancestral trauma follows us through the years. And again, turning this scared into sacred. So, coming from the Cherokee Nation, we've all heard about the Trail of Tears. We know about the boarding schools. Candi had her parents in the boarding schools. I had a grandmother in the boarding school. My grandmother, I never saw her speak unless she was talking like this. Because if she spoke in the boarding school and they saw she was speaking her native tongue, they would beat her. So even in her late 90s, she still spoke with her hand over her face so that nobody could hurt her for speaking her language. In my own journey with my grandparents and some aunt and uncles, they kind of cornered me at a family function and started browbeating me with their Bible. And my grandmother says, "God doesn't make mistakes." To which I said to her, "You're absolutely right. I am not a mistake. I believe that God put people like me on this earth so that people like you can understand the depths of unconditional love." 6 years into my transition, my grandmother was still using the wrong pronouns. And at that point, with a full beard, surgeries, many surgeries I had gone through, I joked with her and I'm like, Nanny, you know, if you call me she in public, people are just going to think you're senile because I clearly don't look like a she. In the beginning, what I would say to her is, if you call me she right now and I clearly don't look, I was this in between, I said, you're putting my safety in jeopardy. And so it went from safety in jeopardy to now you just look crazy. And then last year, January to July, I spent helping my mom navigate my aging grandparents. And in April, I showed up at the house. I opened the door and my grandfather goes, well, hello, Mr. Decker. That was the first time that he ever acknowledged who I am. And then a little while later, my grandmother's on the phone because people are coming over to get things because we've found an assisted living place for them. And she's on the phone with one of her church ladies and she's like, well, my daughter and my grandson are here. And never once had she called me her grandson. And it just came flowing out of her as if it was just the most natural thing. Again, turning scared into sacred. You know, Candi, you mentioned all of these tribes, and one of the things that really speaks to me is that, you know, our government used to say that the Cherokee Nation was one of the 5 civilized tribes. Talk about a microaggression right in our face. The 5 civilized tribes. And I've had friends who, and even I in my past, I'm like, I don't see color, right? That is a microaggression, because when we don't see somebody's color, we don't see their culture. We don't see their spirituality. We don't see their history. We don't see how they've been discriminated against. We don't see that sports teams with Braves or Redskins, like, do we know what the term Redskin was about? I mean, that's when I think it was Andrew Jackson was like, every scalp that you bring to me, I will pay you this amount for a male scalp, a little bit less for a female scalp, and a little bit less for a child's scalp. That's where the name Redskin comes from. You know, Candi has this great thing. She says, thanks taking versus thanks giving. And I love that. I had the opportunity to speak to this woman who works in race here in San Francisco. And I asked her one day, I said, can we play a little bit? And she's like, okay. And I said, do you celebrate Thanksgiving? And she's like, well, yeah, it's a time that my family comes together and blah, 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 blah. And it's about being grateful for everybody around me. And I said, but do you understand that Thanksgiving comes from this place that the indigenous people of North America welcomed the colonizers, and then the colonizers systematically stole our children, stole our land, killed our people? And she's like, well, that's not what I celebrated for. And I said, you know, when I questioned my brother about his rebel flag that he flies, that's the same thing that he said to me. It made her stop and pause, because the intentions that we put on things from now, if we don't remember the history, then the history of our people are lost. Again, turning scared into sacred. When I first came out, my lesbian friends were like, you went to the dark side, you sold out. And my gay men friends were like, you're not a real man. And then my transgender friends were like, if you're not fighting on the front lines, you're hiding. You know what? Some of the best people in our community can be stealth, because from that place, we can equip the movable middle. with language, which is what I hope we do here today, to combat those things that are thrown as hate towards us. You know, I love that the Two-Spirit community has a broader and deeper understanding of who we are. My question is, do we really belong in the LGBT group? That's about orientation. Being trans or Two-Spirit is about our gender. So yes, some of us can be gay. Some of us can be lesbian. I turned out to be a straight guy. Like, now what? Like, how do we hold this? You know, I had a really good lesbian friend of mine who said, all of the great butch women are turning into men. It's such a tragedy. And I said, you know, from my perspective, I finally stopped lying to you all. I'm finally being authentic to who I am. And you think it's a loss? How is this not a gain that you have a friend that is now more authentic with you than they've ever been before? Turning scared into sacred. We have so many things to overcome. So many obstacles. And those of us who are still here, I chose those words on purpose, have found authenticity in the face of hate. In general, 57% of trans youth of youth, no, 57% of trans youth with no parental support will attempt suicide. That number drops to just 4% when one parent supports their child. In the indigenous communities, that rate is 17% higher. 17% higher. In the general straight population, it's 3.4%. For many years, I had that suicidal ideation. If I'm such a bad person to my core, if I'm going to hell, that's what I was told my whole life. You're going to hell for who you are. My family was still in that assimilate or die trauma. If you don't assimilate to look like the white people, they will kill you. That is still rampant in our communities. My mom used to say, honey, make yourself small. And here we are today with a workshop called Silent No More. Candi, thank you for saying yes to this. I had a handful of pills and a glass of water. It was midnight here in California. And I'm like, if you don't help me understand this trans body I'm in, I'm coming to meet you. And what I heard, just like somebody was sitting next to me, is when you're already in hell, there's no place to go. And then my phone rang. And I look at the caller ID. I'm like, who's calling me right now? And it's my sister, who's in Oklahoma. So it was 2 a.m. in Oklahoma. I put down my phone, my water, and I pick up my phone and I'm like, are you okay? And she says, yes. And I said, are all your kids okay? And she says, yes. And I'm like, why are you calling me so late? And she goes, I just needed to hear your voice. When she and I hung up, that's when I lovingly say I lost my religion to find my faith. Last year, 15-year-old Nex Benedict was bullied by 3 girls in school for years. And as a trans guy, he finally stood up to them in the bathroom one day, and over the stall wall, he pours a bottle of water on one of the girls. And the next thing, 3 of them are beating him up. When his grandmother comes to get him, she immediately takes him to the emergency room because he needed care. When the officer came in to take his statement, the officer says, well, it looks like your fault. You're the one that threw the first punch with the bottle of water. That night he went home and committed suicide. This was inside of the Cherokee Nation. They did nothing. They said nothing. They pushed it under the rug. Even with his grandmother's complete support, the layers were too heavy. In 1991 is when the last boarding school closed. I was a senior in high school. We are still turning scared into sacred. Every single person is born with innate gifts. I am like water. I can be gentle or calm. I can be fierce or raging. I can change a rock with a drip, or I can settle in a crack. All of us are change makers. In this community, we are to be celebrated, not tolerated. I'm so grateful for Candi's gift of being able to be out there in the public. My gift is to work in the shadows. I walk with people as a guide while they're unpacking their trauma, sometimes through my coaching practice, sometimes with plant medicine. I believe we are here to find our joy. And most of the time, it's a journey through the pain. And I'm grateful that I have that gift. Candi, I really want to hear more about the gifts that you have to offer.
Ooh, Wopila Tonka. That was, I'm feeling all of that. And I want to just hold all of that and create medicine with it. But you already have. So thank you for sharing it. And okay. With that said, I am gonna ask Mackenzie if they can play a short little 4-minute film about what I was speaking on earlier when I moved back from Portland, Oregon to South Dakota. This is a decision I made after being at Standing Rock. I left in September and I didn't get home back to Portland until June. We were evacuated in February 22nd, 22nd. We stayed for 10 days and then we were evacuated again completely from the entire reservation of Standing Rock, and everyone had to leave unless you were a tribal member or descendant with paperwork who was landowners. So everyone was literally escorted off the reservation, and then we all caravaned to Washington, D.C. There I took space as well. I was thankful to one of our biggest allies. I will always support and give a shout out to Dallas Goldtooth, because from day one, he's always been a brother to me. He's always been a really strong Two-Spirit ally. And on that day, I had told him, where is the space for the Two-Spirit? He cut time and gave some for me, and people were upset, but he said they were the only camp who was there from the beginning to the end, and they were the heartbeat. So, we got to speak. So I got to get up and speak, and I brought, the elders and all the other Two-Spirit people from camp. So, and after that, we continued traveling. I had a lot of elders write to me when I was at Standing Rock who had said, thank you for the Two-Spirit Nation camp. I'm terminal and I get to die happy because I get to show this camp to my family and show them something I'm proud of. The identity I am, and show them why I'm proud of the identity I identify with because of your camp, because of the warriors who are a part of your camp and the Two-Spirit faces who are showing up. And they used us as an example to come out to their family. And so I made it intention to stop into all these folks across the whole United States before I made it home. So we left Washington, D.C., like maybe the second week in March, and I didn't make it home till June. And I literally like put some sweat lodge poles. They're made of willow that we got from the riverbank, and I put them in the back of the truck and took them with me and just built my own sweat lodge everywhere I went. Created the hole and put it back, but when I got back finally, I realized I was just, and I still am recovering from the PTSD, but my children were staying with their dad for the very first time ever in their entire lives. At the time they were 11 and 12. And so they went through all that trauma with me. I actually had a daughter who attempted suicide on the night of evacuation. She's in this film, and I didn't get to share these details with Jordan or Mackenzie. She's talking on there and said, I attempted suicide sometime in February because I felt unloved. And at that time, Helena didn't come out to anybody, but except for everyone in Portland. They were already in a GSA. Helena identified as bisexual at the time, and never came out to their father or anyone in South Dakota. But the whole time they were staying with their father, he was telling Helena, they were extremely homophobic and had no idea Helena was Two-Spirit. And Helena heard all of this. And the night before the evacuation, he came into her room and had said, Trump approved live ammo. And anyone who doesn't want to leave tomorrow is going to end up in federal prison for a really long time. So you better pray hard tonight, because tomorrow morning you might wake up and your mom's going to be either shot dead or in prison for a really long time. And so she said, I lived those months while you were gone. And at that time, it was only September to February. And she never came to my camp because she was very scared of her dad and his homophobia. So scared she wouldn't even come out to our camp. But my younger daughter, Brianna, did. She came out and she stayed there until December, until it got too cold and too scary. And so, she said she didn't want to live another day in that life of homophobia, and she didn't want to live a life without me in it. And she said she wanted to go with me. So she took she said, I took every pill I could find in the medicine cabinet. And she said she didn't want to wake up the next morning. And so that was something I dealt with, and I dealt with it in silence because it was really hard to also navigate her father's family, who I was already in a custody issue. And that's the only reason why I went out to Standing Rock, because my girls' father asked if they could come visit, and I knew something was up. It was the very first time they went to go visit him. And this is why I also became a big advocate for tribal sovereignty in regards to gender diversity and family security, because they had said, I was Two-Spirit and there was no tribal ordinances supporting me as I don't identify as a lesbian. I identify as Two-Spirit and a non-binary pansexual. They couldn't understand that, and it scared them. They were scared. They seen me as a scary being instead of a sacred being. And I love it, Jordan. So that's what took me to Standing Rock was, he did. He went behind my back and he did get custody. And the court systems of South Dakota is red as red can be, and they favored him. They said he had a heteronormative family that my children needed to be introduced to, and so he got custody. And I was so shattered. I was so broken. I didn't know what to do. I surrendered myself to Creator. I literally got on my knees in front of this humongous cedar tree in front of my house in Portland. And I gave an offering and I said, I surrender, Creator. You can have all of me. If I don't have my children, I don't know who I am. And I'm ready to serve. And that night I got invited to go out to Standing Rock, and all paid. And it was actually, I think, Global Justice. I think that's what they're called. They invited me to take their group that was in Portland and kind of be like their guide. They were going out to do like a global summit at Standing Rock. And so I actually went out there with them, and then I never left. I ended up being there. I was in the middle of my graduate program. I was the executive director of the Equi Institute, which is Portland's first queer and trans health clinic. And I just surrendered. I left everything. I had no idea how long I was going to be there. And, I just took all of my experience and everything that I go through. I feel like I'm still on that journey. I'm still making medicine with everything that has harmed me or hurt me. So I know the elements of what I've gone through and what I need to remedy it. So I'm a big advocate of that. But I just want to give just really long context to this film, because when I returned home, I knew that I seen so much need for these youth, because what Helena went through, my mom was still a part of these elders who had homophobia and transphobia beaten into them in a way where they said these horrific nuns and priests, Jesuits, for my mom and dad, it was Jesuits, that they must be, they were like, I think they're homosexuals. That's why they did that to us. They were taught that down the road, and that homosexuals were abusers, and they were the villains. That's how that narrative came into my family's lineage, into Indigenous people's sacred circles. And so, my mom's the elder person in this video, because it took Helena attempting suicide, because my mom lived here in Rapid City and she couldn't believe Helena attempted suicide. She's like, I'm here, I'm her grandmother. Why would she feel unloved? And it took her attempting suicide for my mother to relinquish that brainwashing, is what she said. She said, I was brainwashed. The church brainwashed me. They brainwashed me so much, my Takoja, my granddaughter, felt unloved and almost took her life. So that's what the background to this film is. And I pushed really hard because I seen how many Two-Spirit youth there were on my reservation. And I wanted to highlight them. I wanted to show them that they are loved. They're not alone. Yes, please play the video. I was born like this. I identify as a queer Indigenous Oglala Lakota Sioux, residing on the prisoner of war camp number 334, the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. Traditionally and culturally, I identify as a Two-Spirit. Two-Spirits held a revered, honored role in our sacred circles. The colonizers changed acceptance into fear and eventually homophobia. Indigenous culture and traditions were removed, along with the eradication of Two-Spirits and their sacred roles. We need to move forward to reclaim space and empowerment, mending our sacred circles.
We got to start remembering our history and what we really walk on earth for. And that is to renew our spirits and look in the mirror and be proud of who we are.
I first realized when I was like 5, maybe. I was scared. I was like everyone else. I was scared of what people would say.
When I came out to my dad, it's like, I knew that he didn't like two-spirit people. He thought their way of thinking was wrong.
My mom and dad being homophobic towards me, it hurts a lot.
Well, somewhere in February, where I tried to take my own life, I felt really unwanted and unloved.
The gay bashing was horrible. It struck in our hearts.
We've been through a lot because we love each other. People don't understand that.
At first, you know, I just was like, maybe I'm just gay. But then, no, that wasn't enough. I was more than just gay. And I thought about it and I was like, I am trans.
Two-spirit people have always had a role to be a part of our teal space, to be a part of our families, our extended families, our encampments. And to remove that one pole disrupts what the family strength and empowerment could look like.
A lot of people's minds are reopening from that boarding school and that colonization.
There's definitely a movement coming on, a movement of change, a movement of hope.
It's not easy, but isolating yourself is not the answer. It's really important to find your people.
I just hope that maybe one day that there's equality and somehow peace.
Don't worry about what others think. It's about you and not about everybody else.
Be yourself no matter what. Love yourself.
You're gonna grow and continue to grow. And you just really, really have to give it time.
Don't be scared of who you are.
Every two-spirit person has their own unique identity. Everybody has a place in our changlashkas, in our sacred circles.
We are just excited about this movement because it needs to take place on every tribe, in every culture, because we're all related. And never stand down. We will always stand up.
Thank you, thank you. I always just, want to share that with all the youth everywhere, for all the queer youth, because they need to hear that, that all of them belong here, because no matter what, whether, they're from a rural area or urban area, we all get isolated because of the heteronormative language that is used. Language is humongous, and the words we use and choose on a daily makes a huge impact. And I know we're going to feel that very much coming up here with this next inauguration. I was at Standing Rock on that day whenever number 45 came into office. That was actually one of the most brutal nights at Standing Rock, and the DAPL officers completely changed. We knew they were no longer the sheriffs of the local counties. They only had their eyes were visible and everything else was covered in black. And that's when Tiger Swan took over and the militarized officers took their place. And also why I'm missing my front teeth, because at that time I just got brutally beaten, and I hit my face first on the cement, and my teeth cracked, and my lip ring went through my face, and I got knocked out, and I came to with a concussion grenade. A concussion grenade went off beside me, and I remember it was like a high piercing sound, and it was just they looked like cans of vegetables with no label on them. and they just, they put them down by all the people. They knocked us all down first, and they shot everybody, and the people they didn't shoot, they knocked them down. And then then there were like people of waves coming in, and then the next person kicked me, and like I still have a bump on my head. It was like a really big egg bump, but it never fully went away. And the next person came up, and I'm glad, when you talked about that, about Redskins, in that moment, I start seeing the next wave came in, and they were macing people, and all of a sudden this person, he grabbed me by my hair, and he tried to lift me up to spray me in my face, but I'm a plus size woman, so I felt when he tried to lift me up, I literally felt my scalp, like I could feel my connective tissue, releasing from my scalp. And in that moment, though, it did something to me. It electrified me, and it like brought to the surface, not the trauma, but the resilience that my ancestors survived. I knew in that moment, my ancestors went through this very moment. I'm not reenacting it. I'm living it in present day, and I'm reliving exactly what they went through. And I made a choice in that moment. I said, they are trying to break us, and I am not gonna let them break me. And what they did at that night, they broke me open. They broke me open to see all the medicine I had inside. They broke me open to see everything my ancestors left me and put inside of me. I have 4 generations of their ancestral DNA at a cellular level inside of me. And I've been walking with that, with my hands out, with my sacreds in one hand and my unshakable faith in the other ever since. And so, that's why I do believe that I walk forward in this journey as a Two-Spirit Warrior Queen. And now I will share some slides. I think I'm gonna have to share my screen here. Give me one moment. I still have up the slides from the previous slide, and that's kind of I have quite a few slideshows. I was talking to Jordan, and hold on, I'm gonna stop sharing until I find it. I also have a where did it go? I have a library, a library of slideshows. I had to, put a lot of my photos somewhere. And so I just started creating a lot of different slideshows. And that one is from my Two-Spirit 101. And I'm ready now. And this is one I shared with y'all earlier, Candi and Jordan. I really love this one because this is where I put just kind of like highlights of the work that I've been doing since Standing Rock with this knowledge and this, I definitely do have a really strong background in public and nonprofit management. I have a graduate certificate in public and nonprofit management. I went to I have my bachelor's in Native American Studies, emphasized in tribal laws and treaties. I pursued my master's in public administration from PSU, and I'm a registered lobbyist here in South Dakota. And before activism, I was very much into grant writing and policy. So, I kind of just took a break, threw myself into activism, step back to heal myself and work on my PTSD. And then I kind of just took everything and created the work that I'm doing now, which is definitely still legislative work, legislative organizing, and still working with the tribal council and doing contract work with the tribal organizations to empower their board of directors and give them 101. So I'm living my best life on contract work. So I don't have a one title except for Two-Spirit Warrior Queen. All right, I'm gonna try to go through this without telling too many stories and just hitting my highlights. So this is my ancestor. He was born with the name Little Chief, and he was the whip man for Crazy Horses Band, and he earned the name Brings Plenty Horses to his tribe. And whenever they placed our ancestors on Indian reservations, they gave them government names. And in my introduction, I said, Mi Washitu Chejekile Candi Brings Plenty. I said my colonizer name is Candi Brings Plenty. My Lakota name is Wakia Tuampi Iyo Yampawi, which is bright lightning, which is bright lightning woman, but I identify as non-binary, so I could cut off the woman part, bright lightning. And when they did this, every Indian reservation was reserved land, and through the federal government, they identified each of these reserved lands as prisoner of war camps. So you can Google prisoner of war camp number 334. There is no other prisoner of war camp number 334 except for the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. And every Indian reservation across the United States has a POW number. I don't know any other ones except for my own, because that's my story, my lineage that was passed on to me, knowing that, you know, my great-grandfather didn't know the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. He didn't even know Indian Reservation. They were just marked, just like on their arms, on their bodies, they were even burned, POW 334. So my great-great-grandfather, Little Chief, was given the colonizer name Jackson. They cut his earned name, Brings Plenty Horses to his tribe, to Brings Plenty. And I carry that name now, Candi Brings Plenty. As introduced, I use they, them pronouns, Oglala, Lakota, Sioux, non-binary. And as I said, you know, I put all of this lived experience, my education, my background, my passions, and now I identify as a healing justice practitioner. I use they, them pronouns. I advocate for transgender children, and the words matter. So, you know, I'm trying to not only advocate on a legislative level, city level ordinances, I'm also doing a lot of tribal council advocacy. So I use Lakota words and interpret and translate a lot of the work that I do. So Wakanja means children, and it actually translates in Lakota to sacred chosen ones. So they emphasize that these children aren't villains the way they were implanted by the boarding school trauma. They are sacred. They are chosen. They are Wakanja. So words matter. Trans children are still children. This is in Portland, Oregon. Continuing to do public and cultural advocacy. I'm just going to skim through these because I'm trying to get through a few others. These are photos from Standing Rock. This is the teepee that I lived in throughout the whole entire duration. This is my our camp at the Two-Spirit Nation, and we had wood stoves. You can see in my little chimney. And then we also had other structures called tarpies. That's the one behind mine. They were the makeshift versions of teepees, but they were very warm, very useful, and they also had like homemade barrel. I guess they were like oil barrels. We definitely, I guess they burned them out and buffed them out so they were environmentally safe. And we created our own wood burning stoves because it was negative sub-zero degree blizzards. But it was an experience because all of this took me back to understanding how my ancestors lived on this land. But I do want to say, I know for a fact that we did not have these type of horrendous winter and climate effects due to the climate change. So I'm just throwing that in there. And we continued to show up, the Two-Spirit Nation. We continued to not only just take space, but we got to a place where we were sought after, we were asked, they created space for us to continue to show up in the front. And elders weren't able to show up because it was very dangerous and we didn't have elders to sing or to pray or to bring that sacred medicine. And so the Two-Spirit people had to step up. And I'm showing this picture and I'm sitting here because there's going to be a few others about these teepees. In Lakota culture, and I want you to look at the poles at the top of this teepee. Our teepees are sacred geometric structures that were gifted to us by the Star Nation beings, by our ancestors, by our relatives. And they are toroidal figures, as you can see. And every tribal nation on Turtle Island, we are all connected to the land, and every area definitely has their own natural disasters, and ours is the tornado. And definitely up and down the tornado alley, yes. But for us, we received the structure because the wind goes in and then back out, and it doesn't knock it over. And it's the structure that makes it through all 4 seasons. But if you take one pole, just one pole away from the structure, it is no longer sacred. It is no longer able to withstand the entities. And this structure is the family. It represents your tiwahe. There's the tioshpae, which is all of the teepees, the encampment, like your extended family. Your tiwahe is your one teepee and the people in it, your family. And so each family member represents those poles. And if you take out one of those poles, if you remove one of those family members, you can't complete that sacred circle. With that said, that is our lived and practiced cultural entity for what it means to be a family, a tiwahe. And that's why, all of this transphobia and homophobia was taught to us because we are Lakota first before we're anything else. Before our gender, before our identity, before our orientation, before our accolades or any of our, what are they called? Any of our degrees or, anything you identify as. So I often taught folks at the Two-Spirit Nation, and I taught the entire encampment. We continue to share that, how sacred Two-Spirit people are, and the disruption from colonization has broken our sacred circles. They have removed our female and matriarchy healers and our matriarchy leaders and women in positions of power. They removed our Two-Spirit healers and our Two-Spirit medicine people. And, that's part of that divide and conquer. And that's exactly the intention of the boarding school era. It was an act of Congress to put Indian children into boarding schools. All right, I got to move on because I have so many more. But here we go again. This is the photo that's in the National Geographic. And I was telling Jordan and Mackenzie that I donated these, or we donated, the Two-Spirit Nation, we donated our teepees to this action. And this photo ended up becoming like this prize-winning photo by Ryan Visions, a white fellow who stayed with us during the duration, taking photos. And this became a photo in the National Geographic. And right in the middle, there is a teepee that has a, I don't think I can zoom in. Oh yeah, I can. Oh no, it took me somewhere else. All right, sorry. Okay, I don't want to do that. All right, yeah. So right here, there's a rainbow flag. And at the very end of my slide, I have it zoomed in when that teepee set up at our camp, at the Two-Spirit Nation camp. But that's a rainbow flag. And that was the only stipulation I gave, was those are all the people who are arrestables. And I had said, I'm donating our teepees. I know that they're going to get, like every other action we had, they would take all of our drums, our drumsticks, our sacreds, our teepees, and burn them. And they did. They burned those teepees that night in front of everybody, tore them down, burned them. And I just wanted folks to see the rainbow flag, because I said it must go up with these teepees, as it's a beacon and a reminder in honor of the Two-Spirit people who came before us, who are yet to come, and who left too soon. A photo of Jane Fonda, who came. Just like to always throw her in there. I definitely have a story about her, but you know, that is part of what I had shared earlier. She had asked me if I could teach her about being a good ally. And I had said, you know, only this once I will expend emotional labor, because I would like for you to take this lesson and, you know, send it forward, which she did, because she ended up working with Black Lives Matter. And she told me she elevated Patrice Culler's voice and put it on her shoulders, because this is where I had said those words. To be a good ally is to recognize that your privilege and success was built on the shoulders of our ancestors. And so to be a good ally, you will allow an Indigenous voice to stand on the shoulders of your privilege and your success, so that they can be seen and heard. And she bought me a truck. But this is a fella who's Dennis Banks. He is the founder, one of the co-founders of the American Indian movement. And he's the one who gave me the name and the title Two-Spirit Warrior Queen. So I always throw his picture in there to give background and context to how I identify and where I got that name. But I'm gonna move forward. This is at night when we got knocked down, and there's those folks, and I have no idea how, but I always ended up being asked to be in the front. You know, I'm this Two-Spirit non-binary person. I have my eagle fans in both my hands and my sage, and all I had were my songs, my prayer songs. And then there's all these men behind me with helmets, and they're holding shields. And when they started shooting, they all dropped their shields and ran. It was, you know, and that taught me a big lesson. I'm like, there's people who run towards the fight, and then there's people who drop their shields and run. But okay, I'm just going to keep moving forward, showing you I continued carrying the medicine and the advocacy forward. And these are my two kiddos that I was talking about, Helena and Brianna. I really went to get, and I was a registered lobbyist for the ACLU South Dakota, really pushing forward the anti-trans legislative fight across the board, because it starts in South Dakota. For the past 10 years, the bills drop in South Dakota, and they pass with flying colors unanimously. And then the next day they go out like wildfire throughout the rest of the red states. Right here. So words matter, and I'm a person who's not about LGBTQ plus. And I really want to emphasize what Jordan was saying. We don't belong in that alphabet soup at all. And that is the reason why the word two-spirit came about, because we don't belong in there. That is all the contexts and boxes to colonize and assimilate. That is not us. And some people do add the number 2 and the letter S. And when I worked at Glisten, previously before my last position, I worked as the national campaigns director for Glisten. And they were refusing to add the 2 and the S, not because they didn't believe in it, but because they said they did so many surveys and focus groups, and people thought they were separate. They thought the S was something else. They thought the 2, was for two-spirit, but that, and I wanted them to write it out, the whole word two-spirit. But I ended up resigning, and I don't know what happened ever since, but I can't speak to that. So all I'm saying is I did push that here in South Dakota. And I had said, we don't belong in that alphabet soup. I want us to be seen. I want us to be heard. I want us to be read. When there's bills that are being read on the legislative floor, when there are laws being enacted and created on our Lakota lands here in the Ocheti-Sakowing territory. So when I worked for the ACLU, I was able to get that mandated and into codified law in South Dakota, where all LGBTQ plus legislative bills that came through the legislative session had to write out and two-spirit. So, like these bills here, let me move this real quick. Whereas the LGBTQ plus and two-spirit community, and then again down below, milestones of the state's LGBTQ plus and two-spirit, everywhere you see it. Move this to the left. Here as well. So I'm just saying, all of these staunch Republican representatives, I would watch their faces. They'd be like, and two-spirit? Every time. So for me, it was like a brief intervention for them to take it into their bodies. And I had folks write to me and students write to me who were like, my teacher read this new bill, this legislative bill, and I heard her say two-spirit. She said it so many times. I have never heard her say it that many times our entire year of school, and I felt like that was amazing. And they said that they decided to have this whole cohort talking about what two-spirit meant. And then I had another college group in North Dakota start a two-spirit activities group in their tribal college, so words matter. And I just really want to ingrain that, so folks are including two-spirits in anything you have to do with the rainbow soup mix, because I have always felt erased by my own community. But I'm just gonna really go through these a little bit, because these are just some more of the legislative works that I did, and called our tribal nations to the front and asked and reminded our elected officials on the tribes that you're there to represent all of us. That includes our trans kids too. And I asked them to send their warriors and their horse nations. So they did. They showed up. And I asked our athletic sports officials and the Lakota Nation Invitational to make a statement. And they also said, children and teens who are transgender are worthy of the same love and compassion we would show to any children, and are deserving of equal opportunities, including all sports. So with that said, they had passed a motion in the Lakota Nation Invitational that in all the tribal nations in South Dakota, that trans athletes can play and not reveal their gender that was assigned at birth. I'm someone who likes to definitely continue creating space And this is the video we did see. I'm just gonna keep going through. Oh yeah, I do have this video. I'm gonna show this video and pretty much be done now. I just wanted to share this because my sister sent this to me today, and I forgot about it. And I was like, wow, I forgot I was on the History Channel. I hope it shows up. There we
Pride
go.
Month, we're celebrating the contributions and achievements of the LGBTQ+ community worldwide and paying tribute to the history makers who continue to inspire us today, right here on the History Channel.
Ta-da. But yeah, my sister was like, I forgot you were on. She was watching Ancient Aliens or something, and she was like, I seen you. But yes, I'm in a movie, a documentary. It's 3 parts. I'm in the second and the ending. It's on Hulu. It's called Lakota Nation versus the United States. I talk a lot about the boarding school issues and the impact in present day. And we're fighting for the Black Hills, which is still an active case. And we won a Grammy or Emmy. Emmy? Yeah, Emmy. We won an Emmy this year for the best historical documentary, and the producer, Jesse Sharple, he won the best producer for the Grammys or Emmys. I don't remember which one it is. The big golden thing. Yeah, so I'm just gonna, oh yeah, I got invited to the White House. My next adventures are creating, through the Two-Spirit Nation, a Transgender Warrior Society and a Two-Spirit Nation Rites of Passage annual ceremony. And that's it. Wopi Latanka. Here is my information. Go by, this is all outdated for my Twitter. That's crazy. I need to take that off. But yeah.
Candi, you're amazing. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for the work that you do in the world.
So this is thank you very much. And this is the photo of that teepee with that rainbow flag.
Beautiful. I have one more slide to share.
As Jordan's pulling this up, this is Mackenzie talking. Just go ahead and write any questions you have for either Jordan or Candi into the chat, and I'll compile those.
So our call to action. So I am living proof that one parent's support can change a heart from feeling so unloved that suicide is the only option. The first time I thought about suicide, I was 6 years old. I moved in with my father, and not that I haven't been vulnerable already, but we're just going to deepen the vulnerability here. At 6 years old, I was stuffing a sock in my pants because where did my penis go? Like, my brother had his, but I didn't know where mine was. And when I moved in with my father, country boy from Texas, next to the front door, he put a side table with a little bowl on it. And he says, when we walk out the door, you have to put your sock here. But as soon as we come home, you can pick it back up. That same man, when I was 19, he went to the doctor. He was very ill. And it was a Social Security doctor. He was trying to get on Social Security, and the Social Security doctor wouldn't write him a prescription because he didn't pay for the visit. And the doctor says you have about 48 hours to live. But if you pay me $125 for the visit, I can write you a prescription that'll save your life. And so I go to pick my dad up, and he's telling me the story. I'm like, oh my God, Dad, what are we gonna do? And he's like, that's all right, son. Let's just go down to the pharmacy and get some water pills. He had congestive heart failure. And I said, Dad, I told you I was a lesbian, not a boy. And he said, I think you're the best of both. And then he died when I was 24. But that, I think you're the best of both, took me my entire life through that suicidal ideation to find my resilience, to be able to sit here and be vulnerable and tell my story, because stories matter. Stories matter. So Paula McKenzie, thank you for allowing us to have this space for our story. So let's talk about what we can do. Let's have a conversation about what we can do as allies. We can speak out when we hear a microaggression. We can change the word normal. There's really no normal. There's majority, but different is not good or bad or right or wrong. It just means not the same. You know, a giant redwood or a teacup poodle, we revere these, but with people, we put our thumbs on different. So let's open the conversation so that we can welcome different. And I'm curious, Mackenzie, I'm not sure what we decided on in terms of if somebody wanted to speak up or say, you know, what they, or if we were going to put it in the chat, like name some other possibilities where, you know, you can think of what you could do as an ally.
Yeah, we wanted everyone to have a chance to answer this question. So I am putting it in the chat and now have opened up the chat to everybody. So go ahead and just take a moment to reflect on what new ideas or potential actions speak to you, and then write whatever comes to you in the chat.
And I know there were some questions that were emailed in before. We'll get to those as well. And then if anybody has some burning questions they didn't get in, then we'll try to meet those as well.
I'm going to read some of these out loud because some of them are coming as direct messages just to me. So listen to trans children about what they need. As teachers, we can add the term two-spirit when we talk about LGBTQ+. To be an ally, ask and listen to the experience and what is wished for as support. Don't assume stuff. Show up unapologetically and authentically. Speak up when there is a put down. Correct misinformation when I hear it. To Larry's question in the chat about the recording, yes, the recording is going to be available to you all pretty quickly, and then we're going to post it on YouTube, so it'll be publicly available in a few weeks.
I agree. I mean, the comment that says I've had non-binary or trans people tell me it's okay if I get their pronouns wrong accidentally. Accidentally is the key word. But I think it's okay, or I think it's important for other people to hear the correct pronouns used and use themselves. So yes, absolutely. You know, accidentally is the key term because there are folks who refuse to use the correct pronouns. And there's folks who continue to use dead names intentionally. So, when our loved ones and our friends are growing with us and learning with us, there are those times where they accidentally use the wrong pronouns.
Shall we move into a few questions now?
I'm ready.
One person asked, what do you think about non-Indigenous people using the term two-spirit?
Oh no. It's like saying, what about a um Jewish Jewish person calling themselves Jewish? I don't know any other term or how to say that, because it's specific. That was my intention of showing the geography of Turtle Island. The term two-spirit is specific to Indigenous people from Turtle Island. And that's why I also wanted to begin by sharing the link and the website that shows you whose Indigenous land that you're occupying. But the term two-spirit, I know I have heard a lot of folks come to the Two-Spirit Nation camp during Standing Rock saying, oh, I identify as two-spirit, but they were non-Indigenous folks. They were white people. And we educated them. And we had another elder come through and say, I've been learning that I do have some friends who identify as two-feathered, and that was from their language. And they use the word two-feathered for other folks who do identify with more than one gender. But that wasn't all of the Indigenous people, and that was not two-spirit. Two-spirit is very specific because the term that was used previously was birdash. And birdash is actually, I think it's a French term for kept boy. And so it actually was prostitute, so they were calling queer LGBTQ identified Indigenous people prostitutes or kept boys. And it was these anthropologists who were annotating also all the different tribes as they were documenting and researching and archiving about our ancestors who did walk this journey that we do. And so when these folks, and it was intentional, they had brought these elders together and asked them to identify themselves, identify and come together to have a cultural, contextual word that identifies LGBTQ folks from and I don't like saying Native, because a lot of folks do say, it's for queer Native Americans, and that's not true, because I feel like queer is not the term for everyone, because we have gender diverse people who are straight, we have gender diverse people who are asexual, and so, like I was saying, gender identity and orientation are two different things. One is how I navigate this world, how I represent and see myself in this world. That's my gender. And then orientation is who I love or who I'm attracted to. So those are two different things. And so, two-spirit is saying, I am Turtle Island Indigenous and I identify with this orientation or in the spectrum of this fluid orientation or fluid gender identity. So unless you walk around every day and identify as Indigenous, and you are Indigenous to Turtle Island, and you are also, so that's hard for me, because some people I'm like, okay, you are multiracial, but then they're also, they don't live their walk as an Indigenous person. They walk with privilege, and privilege doesn't mean you have things or you have a good life. It means you don't experience the hardships.
Thank you. Another person asked, this one was written for Candi, but I suspect Jordan might have some insights on this also. They were asking about healing from PTSD. And in particular, the question was, I can't imagine many people in talk therapy being able to understand your culture and identity, as well as somebody who comes from that background. Do either of you want to talk a little bit about healing from PTSD?
Very specific to talk therapy. That was hard. But I did go because I was worried. I didn't share that part. I meant to. I don't know why I didn't throw it in there. But when I got back from Standing Rock, and also Helena, I think I did want to, but I went off on a tangent. Helena attempting suicide was humongous for her because it was, part of all of it. And her father tried to say, my choices as an activist was why she did that, not because of his homophobia. But then she tried to attempt again because he did. I came home with Brianna and not Helena because the judge let him keep Helena because of what happened. But because she tried to attempt again, I just came and got her, and I didn't care what anyone said or the judge or no one. And her dad didn't fight for her. So I just kept her, but she went to school for a week and she was having panic attacks. And I realized if I have this much PTSD, I know she and my other daughter need to understand trauma. And how can anybody heal unless they understand trauma? Unless they understand their own cultural identity and why this trauma impacts our own subscribed identities. And so I withdrew them from school, and I used my words and my oral tradition fight with the Portland Public School. And I petitioned not to have a written curriculum for my girls, and I homeschooled them for that whole school year. And all I taught them was to unschool and about trauma healing. So now they can trauma map their friends. They can trauma map my mom when she's triggered. Like, they understand so much. And I purposely went to talk therapy because I was worried their dad was gonna, call CPS on me or for something for homeschooling them and then not even having a curriculum for them. So I did go to talk therapy, and it was horrendous because it was even with a Native American person at a very specific tribal clinic in Portland, Oregon called NARA, Native American Rehabilitation of the Northwest. I ended up being this person's therapist and teaching them, but I stuck with it because I wanted the documentation and the paperwork. But through that, I would take my own notes and I started teaching myself what I wanted to teach my children. So talk therapy did not work.
Before I started my coaching practice, I was a trauma-informed massage therapist. And what I've learned is talk therapy gets us so far, but until you can come into the body.
Exactly.
You got to feel it to heal it, right? And sometimes we can do that in a coaching practice, and sometimes we have to thin the veil with plant medicine. Like, whatever works is what works. There are some people that have done great things with talk therapy, but like Candi was saying, even somebody inside the tribe, if they are disconnected from themselves, they don't know how to connect you to yourself. So, it's amazing to find somebody who has understanding of culture, who has understanding of trauma, who has understanding of ancestry, and can bring you into the body so that you can actually really, every thought, feeling, and emotion we have is a chemical reaction in the body, right? And those chemical reactions change the structure of the body. So when we can change our thoughts, we can change our structure. And again, I can't say it enough. You got to feel it to heal it.
Thank you both. I just want to add something here, speaking sort of for myself as a white settler who's done some trauma healing of my own. I think when we look at Indigenous genocide, it's really obvious the traumas that Native people have to heal from. I mean, I'm sure there are probably hidden ones as well, but there are plenty that are very visible. We don't talk all that much about what it takes to commit genocide and the amount of numbing and dissociating that white folks' ancestors must have had to do to be able to do such horrific things. And so I want to just throw a plug out there for anybody who's like, oh, like those people over there have lots of trauma healing to do. Fun fact, we probably all have lots of trauma healing to do. All right, one more question. What might be the role of two-spirit people in helping heal the broken relationship between human beings and Mother Earth?
That's a really big one. But I am gonna say, that was my entire really emphasis on going out to Standing Rock, because I was at a Sundance, the biggest ceremony, the most sacred ceremony of my Lakota people. And my mom was Sundancing, and it was LaDonna's land, who the equipment was coming onto. And my niece's husband is related to LaDonna, and she called him, and just called a bunch of her nephews and male relatives to come. Then she wanted them to, she didn't know what was going on, and she just wanted them there. So they ended up going there, and this was pretty much when it all started, even, because they were like the first to get arrested. They anyway, so she called me there, and I knew it was gonna be humongous. I knew, because I was at the Sundance. I knew that I was here, like basically 1 foot into the spirit world, and this was happening. And I was like, nothing is coincidence. And so I turned to ceremony, I gave a flesh offering, and I asked for protection, because I knew this was a time for me to take all of my culture and upbringing, and to, like I said, I didn't have my kids, and I knew there was this big opportunity to mend our sacred circle. I knew, as a two-spirit, even in this Sundance, like, two-spirit people should be here, but the circle is broken, like the teepee poles, and everything has been corrupted from the beginning of this Kill the Indian, Save the Man congressional act by, the whole boarding school era. That was the emphasis, was to take away our cultural identity and save the civil being. And I think that's where everything has been very much disassembled, as we are very much the the stewards of the land. We aren't just the stewards, we are the children of the land. Unchi Maka, Mother Earth, gives us all our nutrition, all our nutrients. And majority of the indigenous peoples, our creation stories were crawling out of Mother Earth. My people come from Wind Cave. We crawled out of Wind Cave in the Black Hills. And that's why we're water protectors, because our water, our land, everything, and that's why we're in an ecological imbalance and disarray. And I don't feel that two-spirit people have this role, but because we have these traditional protocols in every ceremony, we literally have songs, and we have a practice for millennia before first contact, before 1492. And that was all taken in this emphasis to kill the Indian, save the man, to divide and conquer, for this land grab. And okay, you got all the land now, but there's a whole entity beyond what you're just standing on and building on top of. Everything's related and connected. And all of our languages in our tribal nations, in our indigenous spiritual and cultural entities, we all have something that's similar. For us, it's matakiase, and that means we are all related. And we are all related. And we all drink water. We all need clean water to live. We need clean air, and we need healthy food. And so because we need, those three entities, to remove any type of balance from an ecosystem. So for me, creating this Two-Spirit Nation encampment at Standing Rock was to take advantage of a protocol they did there. And this is what all of our tribes do. When a tribal nation comes, you do a traditional protocol and you invite them in and you introduce them to the spirits and to all 7 directions. There's 7 directions. And to the elements, to the fire, and then it's like they're being reborn and they get to retake their place. And so that's what we did. That was one of my asks. And the Two-Spirit Nation was invited back in. We did the grand entry and we were introduced back into the circle. And so for me, that was my goal, was to create a trauma healing entity that we were coming back for the next generations behind us to create that balance and reclaim our place in our sacred circles.
Thank you so much, both
Was
of
the
you.
question particular to Two-Spirit, or was it?
It's in the chat. It's the last one in
It
the chat.
was particular to Two-Spirit.
Okay.
We don't have much time, but Jordan, if you want to say a thing or two, go ahead.
Well, if we look at science and we think about all of these people who are accelerating particles to try to recreate the Big Bang. So I love what Candi said, that we're all connected. So if we're trying to accelerate particles, our eyes are actually decelerating particles so that we can see individuals, right? If we didn't have our eyes, we would just be energy. But our focus comes with our eyes. If we can just remember that we're all energy and our energy is all intertwined with each other, we're not separate. If we could just act, if our humans could just act like that.
Thank you both. Paula, can I hand it over to you to talk about some future events?
Yes, and first I just want to express our gratitude to Candi and Jordan for everything that you've shared with us today. And I also want to thank Mackenzie for bringing Jordan and Candi together and organizing this event today. So much gratitude. So now we are wrapping up, and we do want to let you know about some upcoming webinars that we will be holding in the next couple weeks. So Mackenzie is going to put links in the registration pages for these programs in the chat, and we'll also send them to you in a follow-up email. So first, on the evening of February 4th, Professor Kristen Carpenter will offer a presentation called Implementing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. She'll talk about the groundbreaking work being done to implement the UN Declaration by Native attorneys at the UN and at the Native American Rights Fund and the University of Colorado Law School. And then on February 22nd, we'll offer our workshop called Roots of Injustice, Seeds of Change Toward Right Relationship with Native Peoples. This is a 2-hour participatory program that symbolically puts us right into the story of the colonization of Turtle Island, so we can reflect on what this history means to us today. The workshop is presented by a team of Native and non-Native facilitators. And then on March 12th, our co-director, Geraldine Dakota, will give a slide presentation about the Indian boarding schools and multi-generational trauma. Geraldine is an enrolled member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa. and she'll talk about the consequences of federal Indian policy for Native people as a whole, and also for her own family. So finally, we'd like to ask you to fill out a short evaluation form for this program. We do this every time we have one of these webinars. Mackenzie is also going to put a link in the chat to the evaluation form so that you can just click on the link and fill out the form. We really appreciate your comments. We learn from them. And so we really ask you to spend just a couple minutes filling out this evaluation form. So if you click on the link now, we'll move you into the waiting room while you fill it out. Thank you all for joining us tonight, and thank you again to Candi and Jordan and Mackenzie.
Wopila Tonka, have a good night.